This session is called Man Down, How to Get More Men Talking. And I've got a sensational panel here today to talk about this issue. So fundamentally, I think the reason why a lot of us are here is around the male suicide statistic, I would say. That's been a big sort of stimulus and a big talking point around anyone who works in and around sort of male issues. And why that's feeding into this panel is because men talking is one of the key issues as to why there are so many men who do end up taking their own life. Statistically, everybody suffers from issues like depression and anxiety. Men, women, everybody always faces these issues, but 75% of suicides are men. And why is that? Why is that? Why does that happen in this manner? And there's issues that come into it. There's lots of things around masculinity that are crucial in this, what our expectations are of men, what the expectations we feel as men. But one of the crucial areas is that we don't talk. I mean, we talk all the time, but we're talking about something meaningful, talking about when times are bad, when we're trying to get through difficult times. We kind of tend to keep that to ourselves in general. So I think, as some of these gents are going to talk about, there's been a really important movement, I think, over the last few years, where men have found ways to talk, places to go to talk, seeking role models who do talk, and just trying to model that kind of behavior in order to normalize it, essentially. And I think this kind of thing is more important than ever with difficult times, post-pandemic. We're in for a rough ride economically, and everybody's suffering. And so we kind of, even though mental health is something that everyone's aware of now, Mental Health Awareness Week seems to be bigger every year, and a slight sense of being jaded, but actually everything that we know and everything we've learned is more important than ever, and has to really take hold from now, really. Anyway, that's me bagging on. I'm going to introduce our panel here today. So firstly, we have at the end Lucas Whitehead, who's Marketing and Communications Director at Andy's Man Club. We have Josh Roberts, the author of Anxious Man and The New Generational Drift. And Antonio Ferreira, who's a mental health activist and speaker and just legend and hero in this space. So firstly, I just want to come to you, Lucas. Andy's Man Club is something that's very close to my heart. I've been to your clubs. It's a fantastic grassroots organisation. Could you just tell us about how it started and what the intentions are, and also how it works?
Yeah, for sure. I'll take these off as well. There we go. First of all, who's heard of Andy's Man Club? Yeah, so that's good. So yeah, I'm not getting sacked. That's decent. A few of you know who I am. They know who we are. Basically, we're a group of peer-to-peer talking groups that were set up following the death by suicide of a man called Andy Roberts in Halifax back in 2016. Andy was 23. One day went out, never came home. Andy's death, unexpected, as are so many suicides. He left behind a young family, namely his brother-in-law, Luke Ambler, and his mum, Elaine Roberts, who then set up Andy's Man Club. They were trying to sort of understand the reasons why Andy had taken his own life, and they very quickly discovered that men, they don't open up about the problems. And they thought to themselves, how can we create a space where men are going to be able to open up about the problems? How can we give men a platform where they can go, they'll feel like they're not judged, feel like they're surrounded by like-minded people where they can open up? So that was 2016, and it started basically one room, June 2016, July 2016. A load of guys went into a room in Halifax, 9 in total, basically opened up about how they felt and how they thought. Next thing you know, fast forward 6 years to where we are now, we've got just over 100 groups nationwide, all volunteer-led staff. We've got 8 members of staff, who the majority of whom basically started off as volunteers. And even then, before that, they started off as people in need of support who were coming to our group. Obviously, it's important to give men a platform to speak. Mental health and awareness of suicide, it's gone through the roof. But it's important really that guys do actually have a platform and they do know of somewhere where they can actually go. Myself, if I take it from my own personal experience, when I went into my first session, I didn't think I needed it. I was really, really stubborn. I thought, I'm not going to get along with anybody here. No one's going to be able to resonate with me. And then within 2 or 3 people speaking, That were me. They haven't been able to shut me up since. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I'd say it's a good thing. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic space where men can basically come, open up about how they feel, and it does save lives. It allows men to express themselves and basically just get support from like-minded people.
And it's really grown, hasn't it, Lucas? Like, how big is it now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
There we go. So there are, as of this moment, there are 100. There'll be 102 as of Monday, the 23rd of May, and we're announcing a new group on Friday. The groups range from England up to Scotland down to Wales, and they ran through the majority of the pandemic as well because we got special dispensation. We've also got an online platform for people to attend. The group's Monday at 7 p.m. every week without fail, apart from bank holidays, obviously to give our volunteers a bit of a rest. And any man over the age of 18 can attend. Registration free, referral free, no cost, straight in. There's so many people who have a frustration with the waiting lists when they're trying to, deal with the mental health. And we don't have any of that. You can come straight away and you can talk to people who 9 times out of 10 will be going through similar things to what you're going through. Big believers in shared experiences, I'm sure the other members of the panel will be. And shared experience is a really, really powerful thing. And it opens a gateway for people accessing basically more help and more support for the mental health. We're normalising it, and the more towns and cities and villages that we can get into, the better.
That's great. Antonio, can we move on to you? And can you tell us a little bit about your journey sort of in this world and kind of also the responses that you've had?
Yeah, so I feel obliged to mention my age, but I feel whenever I mention my age, everyone's like, you're so young. So I'm 24. I'm a 24-year-old student. I currently study psychology with cognitive neuroscience at the University of Essex. I'm more popularly known for being a mental health activist, and that starts, as you asked, at a teenager. So during my GCSEs, being this young black male in the world, I'm the youngest out of 5 brothers. So the pressure was coming left, right, and center from left, right, and center. And for me, it was sometimes people's positive reinforcement is actually pressure to you, and that's where people miss that sometimes. And so growing up, as I said, during my GCSEs, I had this expectation from everyone that I had to be this high achieving male because I was doing so well. When my teachers told me you had homework to do, I'd done it on that same night. And if I didn't, I'd copy out a book, improve my handwriting, because my teacher had this special competition. You'd win this blue handwriting pen, and I was so for that. Once I got it, I was like, this is a bit overrated. But that's the type of, determination that I wanted to show others, but really it was unhealthy pressure I was putting on myself. And so it came to my GCSEs, and it almost felt like this boulder on my back that, grew bigger and kept putting me lower and lower to the ground that I couldn't pick myself back up from, indicating that I should be going to the gym. But at the time, gym wasn't a thing. So I was struggling. And it got to this point where I just got so close to the ground that I couldn't feel myself getting back up. And the first person that actually noticed things were wrong was my head of year at the time, because surprise, surprise, I'd gotten my first detention. In all my time in school, I'd never gotten into any sort of trouble because, again, trying to live up to that expectation of others. And so when he heard I got this detention, he, looked at the reason I got this detention. He saw, actually, he was being quite confrontational. I've never seen him behave like this. And so he spoke to my parents and he said to my parents, maybe Antonio should be seen by his GP and see if there's anything that they can do to help. And going from my GP, almost like the Drake song, it went 0 to 100 real quick, because I was, being seen for ADHD, for borderline personality disorder, for bipolar disorder. At that moment, it was so confusing because there was this clean history to all of a sudden this sort of abnormal behavior. And I remember, again, obliged to mention this in my story, I got my 10 GCSEs. But in doing that, I thought maybe the pressure will lessen now. But now you actually go into sixth form college and you're doing A levels, which everyone knows is a huge jump. And I tell you something, I chose biology, chemistry, psychology, and philosophy as my A levels. I was more than happy playing football for Man United. But I wanted to listen to what others wanted for me. And, the rumors were Antonio's going to be a doctor, Antonio's going to do this, and so forth. So it was like, there wasn't the option. I had to do these things to live up to what people were saying. And so coming to sixth form college, you can imagine that boulder is now a whole lot bigger and a whole lot heavier. And I'm even closer to the ground. And at this point, I just saw no way out. And I thought, you know what, this boulder is going to drag me for the rest of my life. And that was what my tipping point was. In that point, as I said, 0 to 100 real quick, I attempted to take my own life. And in the attempt to take my own life, I ended up in a psychiatric ward on section for roughly 2 years. So 16 to 18. A lot of people ask me, you know, when you was in a psychiatric ward, how did you make it a situation that actually influenced and inspired you, whereas for others, it brings them down a whole lot more? And I said to them, you know what? It was that peer support. And if there's one thing I can ask you or take away with you from today is that when people say you can't pour out of an empty glass, it's not always that the glass is empty. Sometimes we just can't see what's being poured out of that glass, because it were the other patients in that psychiatric ward that really inspired me, really pushed me, and really saw something in me that at the time I couldn't see in myself. And so I came out of, you know, the 2 years discharged, and I went on to want to study psychology, hence studying now at university. And that wasn't an easy route. You know, I'm 24, I'm only going into my second year, so I had to keep trying. And again, a second thing, if you can take away, is that as humans, the best thing we can do is to just try, you know, and that's why I kept going. And so in going to study psychology at university, wanting to help others, we now blame my lecturer for being into the activism mode, because my lecturer, at the time I was at University of Hull, so before transferring to University of Essex, I remember she banged on about it. She was like, Antonio, you need to go out and get extra experience. Your degree won't be enough. The world of psychology is really competitive. And I said to her, listen, I got my 10 UCSEs, I can just get a first. And she goes, I said extra experience. So what I done to simply shut her up, I went and joined the local mind just to get, you know, my name on the paper and say, look, I've signed up. Now, if anyone is aware, when you sign up to volunteer, you get asked to volunteer. I wasn't expecting that. So when they sent me a request saying, can you come tell your story to university? I was like, well, of course not. I was just doing it to show my lecturer, you know. But as I said earlier, the best thing someone can do is to try. And so once I transferred to University of Essex, because I was sort of relapsing at University of Hull because I was so far away from London, where I'm originally from, and services and so forth, I went and signed up to National Mind, and I signed up as a media volunteer. And again, you know, when you volunteer, they ask you to do volunteering things. And so this time they asked me to tell my story at a staff induction day. And I said, you know what, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I went to this place, suited and booted, thinking it was going to be a really formal thing. It's quite casual, as we are now. But anyway, so I told my story for the first time, and it was almost that response that led to that snowball effect. You know, everyone got up and said, your story is so powerful. You need to share your story, because where people wanted me to be a doctor, actually telling my story can still save lives. And then from there, I signed up to, and this is the part I hate because my maths is a bit off, I think 7 other mental health charities: Papyrus, Shout, and this is what I said, a whole heap of them is what I mean. And then from there, I moved on to doing a media being a lived experience media volunteer, to, you know, taking part in some great projects. If any of you watch EastEnders, the schizophrenia storyline was based on my lived experience. So I worked with EastEnders to help them accurately portray that storyline of a young black man with schizophrenia, offering my lived experience. And then so forth, you know, 3-4 years down the line, I'm here on a panel speaking to you guys about it.
I mean, it's just amazing. But how? Yeah. Just picking up on the EastEnders thing, like, how important is it for representation of this issue?
Yeah, 100%. It's, you know, in my opinion, extremely important, because when I was in the psychiatric ward going through the worst of the worst, I didn't see anyone that looked like me that I could relate to. And actually, coming from an African background, mental health was not a topic of discussion at all. And so I'm going off what media portrays. And the best knowledge of mental health that I had back then was the Joker from Batman. That, in honest truth, is the best idea I had of mental health. So using the media to accurately portray and, you know, eradicate misconceptions and stigmas, one, was a big testimony to my journey, but 2, was actually is an insightful moment to see everyone else's reaction, which was like, I didn't know schizophrenia was like this. You know, there was a moment when we was on set, And the director came up to me and he goes, yeah, we're doing this scene where he's hearing voices, and you know, Isaac, who's the actor, he's got his hand on his head. And I said, we don't actually go through that. We don't put our hands on our heads when we, you know, hear voices. That's a misconception.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, we're scrapping that. You know, so it's literally about really getting rid of those misconceptions. And, you know, some of the things that they asked me, as executive producer asked me as always, what are the most important misconceptions that you'd want to get rid of? And I said the fact that people believe people with schizophrenia are a danger to others more than they are to themselves. Because, you know, when I was hearing my voices, of course I was getting, you know, hearing commands to other people, but actually where I have a mind, I also have a heart. And so my heart was telling me you don't want to do that. So I'd end up taking it out on myself. Yeah. So we are more of a risk to ourselves than to other people. So I think I've answered your question.
You did, brilliantly. Josh, can we come to you now?
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your books and kind of just picking up on what Antonio's talking about as well? Just the kind of people you can talk to and the representation that you're looking at within your work.
It's an amazing story, by the way. I wasn't aware of it. So thanks for sharing it. Similar in some ways. I had a breakdown on my own in 2016. Went to bed as a pretty normal white middle class heterosexual man, and then woke up the next morning to kind of discover that my mind had collapsed. And eventually I was diagnosed with this generalized anxiety disorder, they call it. It's just like basically worrying the entire time, and worrying about worrying, and then feeling guilty about the fact that you're worrying about worrying, and pretty shit. Extraordinary series of circumstances. I got asked to write an article about it in the Times newspaper, which I did. And then on the back of that, I got asked to write a book about it. So I spent pretty much the whole of 2019 speaking to people of all different shapes and sizes, lots of boys, lots of girls, about mental health and these kinds of topics. And it's the thing I take away from sessions like this is like, there's so much in our world that you can get down in the dumps about and gloomy about and those kinds of things. But mental health, and particularly the conversation around men and mental health, just feel like it's moving so quickly and dynamically. It's a pleasure to be here.
Do you think that things are changing generationally in that sense? Do you think that the younger lads that are coming through are perhaps a little bit more attuned?
I think it's an age thing, but I also think it's a socioeconomic kind of trickle down. Okay. So we had my dear friend, Stephen Fry, wrote I sent the guy one fucking email, did the foreword for my book, and he talked about how you have this kind of trickle down where it starts with celebrities, the princes, people like him are able to talk about it. Then it's kind of people in positions of privilege like me, you know, white middle class, all the rest of it, and then it kind of trickles down to everyone else. I think from phase 1 to 2 took us about 10 years. And I feel like we're getting from phase 2 to 3 super quick at the moment. And I think that's true across all different ages, actually.
Yeah.
I used to go and do talks at crusty old law firms, and the partners would be sitting at the back, like, staring at their watches and, you know, checking their emails. And they don't do that anymore. It's even in just the last 2 years.
Yeah. I was going to come back to you about this, Lucas, as well. That Andy's Man Club. I've been to one of your sessions in Hull, and I was very surprised. I mean, Luke Ambler is an ex-rugby pro who started it, and there's a kind of natural kind of working class, or, you know, group of men that you address. But actually, when I went, it was lots of different classes, lots of people from very different backgrounds, and it's quite amazing how it's so inclusive.
Yeah, that's it's one of the biggest things about it, and it's one of the my personal favourite things about it. To be fair, you see people who ordinarily outside of those four walls just won't get on with each other. You get people like me, 22-year-old northern, football lad, getting on with people who are in the 70s, who basically, don't have a clue about football, who are into classical music, and basically
you don't have to be 70 to be into classical music.
Well, yeah, but
just providing that.
Well, put it this way: they don't listen to Dr. Dre. You see them taking an active interest in each other's lives, and that's back to what Josh said. It's basically it's that trickle down sort of thing where if you see one person who is desirous to help himself feel better, then it'll trickle down to everyone else in that particular room. And, you know, like, you know, you touched on it being a generational thing. I think as the younger generation, we are sort of more eager to promote openness about mental health. We're more, you know, eager to share our stories than perhaps people were 10, 15 years ago. But it's, like you say, you go into that room and everyone just sort of resonates with each other, and little snippets of information stick with you. I mean, for me, my personal story, my dad were a heroin addict, and he passed away. My mum's had addiction issues throughout my entire life, and it got to a point where basically those addiction issues started to affect me, in the sense that I was dealing with her problems, I was dealing with her finances, and I was dealing, you know, with a lot of her problems. And I opened up about this at an Andy's Man Club session in Dunfermline in Scotland, where I'd only been one time. And someone caught me at the end of the session, a bloke in his 40s, and he says to me, listen, I'm going to say something really simple to you. Don't let your mum's problems become your problems, which is so painfully simple. It's such a simple thing to say, but it stuck with me. And ever since, you know, I've supported my mum, but I haven't let her problems turn into mine, and I haven't got overly involved in them. And, you know, you come from a position where you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm not going to resonate with anybody, but people who, like I say, who, you know, who'd normally cross the street to avoid you, take an active interest, you know, in what you're going through in your life. And that, I think the open dialogue about mental health, it doesn't only challenge sort of the stigma around mental health, but it challenges people to be less narrow-minded. And it means that people are more open-minded. They'll talk to anybody, and they'll take an active interest in each other's lives. And that's the key thing about Andy's Man Club. There's people going every week who are basically only going because they're thinking, oh, what about that lad who came last week? I wonder how he's doing this week. I wonder if he's going to get through that door. And they really, really want to know. They really want to knowledge, you know, whether these people are all right. And it's a really, really touching thing to see.
Antonio, how can we all help men?
That's a
Talk
big
more.
question. That's
And
a big question.
I know, but particularly at work, you know, we're here, Retail Trust, like, you know, what can we do workplace-wise where we can try to create atmospheres and routes into men and get them to open up?
I think one thing, and I'm sure both of you agree, is trying to have intimate conversations. And by intimate, I mean sitting down face to face with men won't work out. We're not that type. Yeah, we're not going to do that. So I think it's more activities based. So, you know, when I used to work with Adidas, we do this morning freshers. It was a long time ago. I can't remember what it was called, but we used to sort of just do an activity before we started shifts, and like, you know, say for example, we were doing this thing where we had to put the ball in each box or whatever. We could talk during that because conversation would just naturally flow during that activity. Whereas, you know, if we're sitting down sort of one-to-one talking, like, you know, we're in a therapy session, it's a lot harder because, I don't know, maybe it's our pride, our ego, or, you know, our manlyhood, whatever it may be, but it's easier to talk without the eye contact is what I'm trying to get at. So in the workplace, you know, setting up activities rather than just spaces, activities that where men can talk is a lot better than creating spaces, because, you know, it's easy to say, you know, this is a safe space for us to, and I think as you mentioned, you know, although there are people that come and talk and, you know, they're in that safe space, there is still some sort of activity going on. You know, we're not physically sitting down and talking, oh, so what's going on today? What's on your mind? Sort of thing. One, we're coming willingly. And two, you know, there are things for us to engage in while we're there. So I give you a long-winded answer there. But yeah.
Is that something that you'd agree with,
I
John?
think, I could totally. But the only thing I would add is I think the companies who do really, really well at it are the ones where there's a senior bloke who talks about, if you can find someone in the organization, a senior partner, an MD or whatever it is, to talk about his experiences, then it just kind of creates the environment for everyone else to talk about theirs. And the companies, conversely, who do very badly are where the conversation is only happening at the very lower levels of the organization, is in my view. Yeah. And also, companies tend to focus on cure rather than on prevention. So, you know, they'll build meditation suites and hire CBT therapists and all this kind of stuff, which is great. But if you didn't, you know, if you weren't sacking the bottom 10% every year, having unannounced performance reviews every 6 months, 100-hour weeks, all that kind of stuff, maybe you wouldn't need the CBT therapist, and maybe people would that conversation would flourish on its own, kind of thing.
Yeah, because people are still worried bringing this kind of stuff up at work, whether it's going to have an effect on their career or promotion.
Which
or
is such bullshit. Sorry,
Yeah.
I guess get quite exercised about this because people say the same thing. They go, well, if we start talking about it, it's going to magic up the problem. And the reality is 25% of the people in the population today have one of these problems, you know, anxiety, depression, bipolar, whatever it might be. That's not going to change. You know, it's like the whole thing about if we talk about LGBTQ plus issues, it's going to suddenly people are going to start becoming gay because they've heard about this thing existing. It's just absurd. And the same thing is true of mental health. Thankfully, those companies are becoming fewer and fewer. I think it's also because younger people are. It comes up in interviews now. It's like, what's your policy on mental health? Like, how do you incorporate well-being into the working day? And if you don't have a good answer, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. God, we're running out of time already. Scary. Just finally, I'll just quickly sort of go through. Is there anything that you'd like people to take away when they leave here and leave this session? Is there any particular sort of one thing that you would let them know, Lucas?
Don't ever think that what you're doing to support mental health is too small. Even sharing a post on Facebook or being here today, you don't know who's going to see it. You don't know who it's going to affect. Share the living daylights out of everything, and just be that safe space. Because you know you will reach people. You might not always reach people, but one life saved, you can't put a price on it, can you? So just don't ever think what you're doing to promote mental health is too small. Do it.
Yeah, I've got two things, and I promise will be short. The one I'd say is, you know, it's okay to judge a book by its cover. We all do it. It's survival nature, but it becomes wrong when you don't give opportunity to read the next page of that cover. And the second thing I say is my favorite story. I've got it tattooed on me. It's the hare and the tortoise, and I say the hare and the tortoise because one, you know, the tortoise won because he was patient, and the hare lost because he got complacent. So take your time with each day. You know, take everything day by day. Be the tortoise, and you will reach the end. And promote that as well. As you know, I'm sure the hare will tell the story different from the tortoise, but.
Oh, mine would be so trite and cliched, but I would say it always gets better. That's like the end of the book is like, then it gets shit again, and then it'll get better again, and then it'll get shit again. But at some point, it always gets better, and it's always worth hanging around to experience that moment.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I'll just finish with a quick couple of housekeeping things. So there's a lot of resources on retailtrust.org.uk and helpline as well. So if there's any issues that have been here or you're worried about anyone, then there are resources on the site. I need to flag up that you're available in the pop-up Waterstones here,
Yeah, great.
and so's mine. So
But mostly mine.
mostly yours. Yeah, that's the story of it, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. Andy's Man Club, andysmanclub.co.uk, antonioferreira.co.uk. I think they should be all somewhere on the programming. And next up on this stage is headline interview with actress, recording artist, and songwriter Nicola Roberts from Girls Aloud. She's in conversation with Anna Whitehouse. But finally, I just want to say thanks so much to Lucas, Antonio, and Josh. You know, incredibly inspiring men, devoting all their time and heart and minds to these really important issues, and you really needed. And thanks very much, and thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.